Hai, давай, 3, 2, 1. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are. If you, for some reason you still have the boredom to watch these kinds of things, back to part 2 with Sylvian. We're going to talk about the sovereignists, and hopefully we'll be able to integrate into the conversation some other movements from other parts of the Европейский Союз in order to maintain the interest of our foreign friends. And during the break, I took a stroll through Sylvian's bookshelf, and I was able to find this over 100-year-old book. Let me show it to the camera. And the reason well, first of all, the reason I took a stroll through his shelf is boredom, but but the reason I chose to start reading a little bit from this is because it makes a very good point, which is now again salient, because our country has been into the mainstream news, global news, in the last month. It's January 31st when we're filming, so I don't know, maybe February 10th or something when you're watching this, but for two reasons: the Kotsofenești hula baloo and the shit show, the clown show in our politics, where there was this happened before, a little bit over 100 years ago. So Mr. Charles Upson Clarke writes in Greater Romania, preface, again 1922, sorry, edited in New York, Dodd, Mead and Company, 1922. I don't think the company still exists, but the book still does. Preface. In my study of anti-Italian propaganda during and after the war, World War I, I became interested in the similar campaign of misrepresentation directed against Romania. The two Latin sisters had much in common in their relation to the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, but Romania was far less known in the West than Italy. Accordingly, I welcomed an invitation of 1919 from the Romanian government to come out and observe the post-war situation on the spot. This book is based on those personal observations. Our ignorance of Romania is so great that I have thought it desirable to sketch the geography and history of the country as an introduction. Her part in the war has been so maligned that I have inserted a brief account based on official sources of her heroic defense of the great victory she won over Mackensen at Mărășești. Her campaign against Bela Kun's attack has been so distorted that I have devoted a chapter, also embodying an official report, to the story of her clever and successful parrying of the blow. Screw the commies 106 years ago. So we're back into a very similar moment where our Western friends are reading straight up BS or listening straight up BS about Romania, except as opposed to 1922, from both sides of the political spectrum, right? So people listening to alternative left-wing media in the West, they're hearing that we're gearing up for fascism here or something.
Something like that, yeah.
And the people who listen to alternative right-wing media, they're hearing that our God Savior Călin Georgescu is being repressed and whatnot. Both of these being entirely false. And again, this happened before, according to this British or American author. I'm sorry, I don't know the author, but I just like the way he started his book. So the main conversation has been framed and officialdom from the Европейский Союз, Brussels, whatever you want to call them, have basically copy-pasted the regime's propaganda from here, namely to frame it as sovereignists versus progressives, pro-Westerners and whatnot. Who are the sovereignists?
Well, hello everybody. First things first. Yeah, that's very cute because actually there is the whole coinage of the term is actually a mockery of the whole political spectrum in Romania that is somehow considered to be sovereignist in whole. Actually, you cannot say that you have a colossum of sovereignists, of right-wing parties, or let's say a conservative political power in Romania that can be seen altogether as being sovereignist. It isn't like you have an alliance of political forces, of NGOs, and so on. Basically, every time the right in Romania was utterly fragmented, It is like
Herding cats is a national sport
exactly.
on the right.
Okay, and it's like you have this saying: you have two Romanians, three parties. It's exactly the thing.
Here you can see the Jewish influence because the same is being said about Jews as well, yes.
So, right now, you do have a lot of demonizing going around for years and years from the left against anything that is conservative, Christian, patriotic in Romania. It all started with the referendum back in 2018. And I do recall when some youth, at the youth gathering, some people from other organizations, there were some organizations of the church, they asked me, Sylvian, what do you think about this referendum? How's it going to be the next year in 2018? And I was like, there are these guys known as Marxists, all right? Progressists.
Progressives.
They hate us. They hate us up to the marrow of their bones, and they just want to see us dead. Okay? It's just their faith. Some of the progressives are actually, let's say, auto-financed in Romania, but it's just too few people that really do stand out in this aspect. But most of them, as in the West, you have a programmatic agenda based on international institutions that lobby for certain politics. They want certain legislative bodies to take measures with regard to family, to welfare, to immigrants, so that everything would keep up with the agenda of the left. Okay, these people will almost come out of nothing and attack us and say, we are medieval, we are being
backwards,
retrograded, obscurantist,
retrogrades,
stuff like that. Oh, it's not gonna happen like that. Okay, we don't see them in the media right now, and it is kind of true because you didn't have this kind of front-facing war up until the referendum, because for the left, you didn't have a challenging moment in Romanian politics that needed this, let's say, a coming out story of the left, using their own words. But the referendum was actually a benchmark in Romanian politics.
And the watershed moment,
yeah.
for sure.
And it was a milestone because since then, we can easily speak in Romanian politics about having progressives, all right? You wouldn't have that, then only some, let's say, secular, limitative voices in PNL, like Raetsky.
Yeah. Current ambassador in Japan.
I don't care. You had USR in its first years that actually gathered a lot of voters based on the proposals of some members, even if it was a catch-all party back then, in 2016 when it got into the parliament. But I recall a lot of my colleagues voting for USR because some members of USR vowed to defund the church. All right? So it was the start, let's say, the ferment of a progressive coming out of in Romanian politics. And at that time, everyone that wasn't with the progressives, with the majority claiming that, well, the good majority in the media, in the mainstream politics, that whoever isn't against the referendum is for Dragnea, somehow voting for the referendum, it doesn't matter that it was for or against the referendum, but just going to the ballot was a way of making Dragnea's play somehow through. They couldn't define the legal mechanism. Dragnea could bail out of jail and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah. For reference, check out the video "What's the Matter with the Romanian Protests" made by yours truly in 2018. At that time, the de facto prime minister was a guy named Dragnea, who in the meantime has seen the inside part of a jailhouse. He's now out, but no longer that important in politics. And at that time, because that guy was particularly despised in society by almost all political sides,
Exactly.
the far left tried and eventually succeeded, although only for a limited period of time, but they did succeed in attaching a socially conservative cause to that guy, even though that didn't particularly care.
Although that guy actually didn't endorse the idea, and I can offer the explanation for it, because PSD, the Social Democratic Party, wouldn't have wanted for the referendum to pass, because it would have been an extraordinary civical exercise that could start crippling the current party-state solution in Romania. So
that, and also would have lost them a lot of credence with the SND group in the European Parliament as well.
But one thing that nobody absolutely wanted to talk about that time was that the executive ordinance, that the sole organizing procedure of the referendum was based on, was actually unconstitutional. So the PSD planted in that executive ordinance the seed of being unconstitutional. So in the unlikely event at that time that the referendum would pass,
there would still be
the
ways
Constitutional
to challenge it.
Court would have the possibility to challenge it, and afterwards PSD would go out in the European Parliament and say, okay, look, the Romanian judicial system is working just fine. Okay, when the thing that it has to be mentioned at that time, actually they tried to provoke a lot of issues in the judicial system because they wanted their own people bailed out.
Of course.
So, the history of being sovereignist in Romania is linked to this pivotal event. But I want to make things a bit back in history, because we had some, let's say, precedents for the current sovereignist movement, and they must be noted out. The first one is Vadim Tudor. At the beginning of 2000, well, at the end of 99, we had this ex-communist politician that just went out on the telly, ransacking politician, promising us that he would just align corrupt politicians on stadiums and kill them with a machine gun. He started attacking the then president, Emil Constantinescu, based on some
weird
shit scandal. All right, but I don't know, it just catched up with the audience. And
it was a similar political moment with now.
Exactly.
Really. I mean, fuck the regime was very popular.
Even though Corneliu Vadim Tudor was a really cultivated person, he usually got up in shows with quizzes and stuff like that. He was really...
Yeah, he was an erudite.
Yeah,
sure.
he was an erudite. And he also had a great collection with manuscripts, even from Napoleon or Mihai Eminescu. So the guy was he was actually fully acknowledging what he's doing. He wasn't a madman.
No.
He just played the madman, all right? So it was a electoral opportunity for him, and he actually got second in the first round of the presidential elections with Ion Iliescu. And there's this clip we evoked about in
during the break.
During the break, yeah. Some TV went out.
Do you want to watch? Because that's really how it goes.
Yeah. At the exit from a club,
some lady who had a beef with him and was complaining that his watch was actually from her collection or something like that.
Yes, weird stuff.
And she wanted it back. It's very tabloid stuff. But his honest reaction was like, "Do you want this watch? Yeah, right. But how about I screw you in your mouth, effectively?" It sounds far more vulgar in Romanian than it can really be translated into English. It's one of my gripes with the English language. It's nowhere near as creative with slurs and curses the way Romanian, or to be fair, Hungarian or Serbian can be, right?
But everybody was like, Burn, yeah, we need
Yeah.
a man like that.
Yeah, I mean, the guy was, that one was appreciated. And to this day, if you want to curse without cursing in mainstream and polite society, you just say, I was Vadim. And that's definitely enough. Everyone knows exactly what you're talking
yeah,
about.
he actually had slurs like, you should piss sand and stuff like that. I mean, it's
which was
on national television.
Yeah, which in itself was beneath several layers of irony and shit posting, which was basically, you get syphilis. That's exactly that's what it meant, really. So yeah, I mean, the guy was an erudite, was very smart.
Yeah, and at the exit from a nightclub, some youngsters would ask, "Who are you voting for?" And they said, "Vadim." Why? Because he's just crazy. He's a madman.
Yeah.
Okay, so back then, over 30% of Romanians wanted a madman and not Ion Iliescu.
Yeah.
So, what would be today the progressives, back then,
a lot of them voted for Vadim.
Voted for Iliescu, actually.
Well, yeah, those that are older, but those that are now in their 40s or 50s, a lot of them did vote for Vadim.
Yes. Yeah. But those who are older were, we don't want the madman to get in power. We should vote for the rational.
Hold your noses and vote for the rational communist politician. Yeah, we know he's communist.
Yeah, we know the same thing in the first round with Ciolacu and mostly Ciucă, thank you. So, Vadim created the so-called România Mare Party, Greater Romania Party, that is.
The same name as the book, because that's why I chose it.
Evoking Greater Romania from the interwar period, okay, advocating for unionism, and also having a lot of intellectual figures in the party.
Oh, yes.
Okay, most of the senators or the deputies promoted by PRM, that is the acronym in Romanian, were actually intellectuals, university professors, but with a conservative stance on a lot of issues. But economically, mostly, it was still socialist.
Yes.
Let's face it. All right. PRM got just lost after the 2004 elections, alongside with the rise of the Democrat Liberal Party with Băsescu and the Yes Alliance. When actually...
Justice and truth.
Justice and truth.
Kind of like Pravo i Spravedlivost or something.
And then we actually learned that the people who voted for the Greater Romania Party were actually voters for a populist party.
Yes.
And I recall those times, 20 years ago, where being populist wasn't a bad idea. It was actually European, the European Popular Party? Populist Party?
Yeah, pretty much.
It was like pretty much over there. So, wait a minute. 20 years ago, it was all right to be a populist. Now, it's not.
No, it's haram.
Exactly. So, basically, those voters went towards Băsescu.
Yeah.
For
roughly the same reason.
Yeah. After Băsescu's first term and its breakup with Călin Popescu-Tăricianu and the National Liberal Party, an interesting figure came into the scene, known for its absolutely shit shows on its own television in prime time, called Oglinda as mirror television, or OTV, or like mirror television, named Dan Diaconescu.
Yeah.
Well, Dan Diaconescu,
the founder of modern tabloidism.
Yeah, it was
and modern shit posting.
Shit posting on television. It has a lot of episodes for finding a woman named Elodia that was killed
allegedly
by her husband, who was a cop. And a lot of people...
Yeah, he basically created a multi-generational drama with that. But it worked. I mean, it had very high audiences.
Exactly. And he launched his own party. He got into the parliament. PPDD,
the People's Party
of Dan Diaconescu. Yes, so still the same populist name. Framework, exactly. And almost all of his parliamentary, his whip in the parliament, Daniel Fenechiu. They went to PNL.
Yep.
They were absorbed, all right? And for some years, we didn't have a populist force in Romania.
But there were populists in every single mainstream party.
Exactly. Yeah. But neither did we had progressive parties. Well, excepting, I can't recall the name of that party from Cluj with the issue with housing.
Oh, demos.
Oh, demos. Yeah, exactly.
But they were getting 0 point
I
nothing.
forgot about demos.
Yeah,
okay.
0 point
Excuse me,
something.
Claudio Crăciun.
0 point something most
Yeah,
of the
0
time.
point something.
Yeah.
So we didn't have like the same party framework as in the West. And Romania was actually the only European country that wasn't aligned to this sort of political spectrum. And 2018 came into force. Well, USR actually acknowledged with the referendum that itself it's a progressive party because they were against naming in the constitution clear that marriage is between a man and a woman. They wanted to have, in the name of freedom, a false freedom, all right, to have a backdoor for gay marriage. That's actually the truth.
Yeah, well,
And-
at least some of them acknowledged it, that is the
If it-
case.
exactly.
Even then, as the debate was raging on.
That was actually the point
And they
when
were so
Nicu-
convinced by it that they kicked out their founder.
Exactly, Nicu Șordan.
Yeah, the current mayor of the capital city.
Yeah,
And also running for president this time around.
Exactly, that makes things more interesting.
Yeah.
Exactly, right now,
And he holds a grudge against those.
because that was the pivotal issue in USR, and that was the moment when you had a lot of, let's say, dissidents
Yeah,
from
spiritually
USR.
conservative people, let's put it this way.
Yeah, that were actually kicked out of USR.
Or
Because-
they left voluntarily.
Or-
because they're like,
but mostly they were, de facto, they were kicked. So they were bullied and they left voluntarily, but kicked out, essentially. All right. So, seeing that actually progressivism through the false manifestation promoted by the liberal mainstream media that advocated for the idea that we need gay marriage, we need to be modern. Romania isn't modern because we don't have gay marriage, gay rights, gay adoptions and stuff like that.
institutionalized pedoism.
Is something, yeah, and that's one of the reasons we don't go front up in history. That's why we don't have highways. We don't have technology, we don't have flying cars, because we don't have LGBTQ agenda in Romania. And actually, the youth, because over 200 of our student NGOs, actually the National Council of Pupils is a leftist organization.
Yeah.
Because we
Was at the time, still is.
don't have a solid conservative youth, let's say, mainstream current,
Yeah.
right, except in Liga Studenților. Sorry for making ads on it. Everybody thought, okay, we can't win now as progressives, but let's try the next elections. All right? So, they came up with, in time, Nicu Ștefănuța, I'm pronouncing it as in English. They came up with...
Let me clarify, Nicu Ștefănuța is one of the people personally at fault for the shit show called the AI Act of the European Union, the one that is being blasted by Elon Musk correctly this time around. Again, not a big fan of Elon Musk, but he's right on that.
Ex-USR.
Yeah, it was
member
also
of the European
incubated
Parliament,
in
yeah.
the same Save Romania Union party. Nowadays, he's is independent, technically speaking, because he's so far left, even for the Save Romania Union party, let's face it.
But still...
And
he
very
was-
much funded by the Democrat State Department. Let's be honest with this. I mean, the guy is deeply inside the Democrat networks in the United States. That's why
Just check his Facebook.
yeah, just Nicu Ștefănuța. I'll leave the spelling on the screen as well. Just check his Facebook, check his resume. He's been given all of those scholarships that are funded mostly by the Democrat Party when the Democrat Party is not in power. And when the Democrat Party is in power, is funded from the State Department, because that's how the grifts work in the US. So there's that. So yeah, so it was Nicu Ștefănuța. Yeah, there were quite a few other figures, but this one is definitely the most
Yeah, and it's the most
well-known.
definite because right now he's the leader of the progressives in Romania.
The small progressive bubble for sure.
Yeah, and he got voted in the European Parliament by over 3% of the voters. And that's something, because if
That
you
was in
add...
2024, yes.
Yeah, and there was actually last year. So if you add its numbers, all right, of numbers of Sense, it was his party, altogether with
Repair.
and some other factions, actually they might get in the parliament the next ballot.
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, if they unify, God forbid. So,
Thankfully, they can't. So that's also
yeah,
a good thing.
let's
Slava
pray.
Bogu, Slava Bogu. They
Let's
can't.
pray they can pass
No,
their differences.
let me give some more context, even for our Romanian followers, actually, because most people don't know this. Reper is, think about it as the faction of the Democrats that gets all of its donations from Facebook employees. That's basically Reper here. Is funded primarily by a corporation named Softwin, which produces a very well-known, globally known product called Bitdefender. Your computer you're using now might actually be using a Bitdefender product. Well, those guys are or had been funding the far left.
You might be financing.
Well, not anymore, because the chain of love got broken towards.
Oh,
yes, because
great news.
Yes, because finally the owner of that particular product was like, hold on a second, you guys spent millions of euros at this point, and your electoral results are zero. So why exactly am I keep funding you?
And I think that guy didn't actually have a progressive agenda.
No, but he wanted some techno-optimists
Exactly.
in the parliament, yes. For other grifts, mostly cybersecurity grifts.
Much cheaper at PSD.
Yeah, and it's much cheaper at PSD, of course, obviously. So yeah, so the reason I'm giving all of this context is because a lot of this, although it may seem narrow local Romanian policy, it actually does have a lot of European implication and sometimes global, or to the extent that we can have.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because Romania, it's being the last country that actually aligned to this kind of framework. I think it's
also the first one that may leave it.
yeah, and I also think that this is because the way we actually are.
Yeah, the way we're built as
you
people.
know,
Yes.
Engels once said that making the international revolution is impossible without crushing the Romanian people.
Yeah, us and the Slovaks for some reason.
Yeah, because the Romanians are actually the uttermost anti-revolution people in Europe, the most conservative.
Yeah, us and the Slovaks for some reason. We were the main ire. We drew the main ire from Friedrich Engels, which again a German, the German problem.
Going back to 2018, the whole initiative with the referendum wasn't organic.
Of course.
Everything was actually
AstroTurfed.
the so-called coalition for family.
Was in itself AstroTurfed.
Yes, and I recall meeting the leadership back then that actually had the idea of using the referendum just as a context to launch a conservative Christian party. You couldn't just burst out on the Romanian political scene and say, "Ooh, we're a conservative party." You need something like a trick, a moment to jump in.
Yeah.
So the referendum was perfect. And
Never let a good crisis go to waste.
after the referendum, in Hayvok, actually didn't pass because of the leadership of the Coalition for Family that organized the whole ballot and had the idea. And why? Because they had stupid messages like the gays are going to come in and steal your children. Well, partially true, yes, but no, yeah. People were like, we don't see any gays. Where are the gays?
Or at least especially not doing what you're saying. And of course they were correct, but they were in the wrong context. I mean, such messaging may be true in San
And they had
Francisco.
billboards with messages like that. And people got scared and started rather more believing the narrative from the official mainstream liberal media that said, okay,
those guys are crazy.
Those guys are crazy. The referendum isn't an actual issue. We have other problems. Hopefully Dragna won bail with the referendum, stuff like that. So, after the referendum has failed, there were two sides that were in the organizing board that just took apart, and they all started having their own conferences. One was at Sibiu, and the other one was somewhere around Cluj. At Sibiu was the Orthodox branch of Coaliția pentru Familie. And at Cluj, with a gathering with Adrian Papahagi, I think Mihai Neamțu back then, and others, were the ones that were with the more ecumenical, closer to the Protestant part of the organizing.
Intellectual, secularish,
Exactly.
Protestantish,
So,
whatever-ish.
both of the sides actually tried through those respective conferences to create a sovereignist, actually the term wasn't coined
The
then,
term wasn't, yeah.
a conservative Christian party. Okay, it didn't work out. In that year, also, George Simeon, that was known as leader of the unionist movement, started campaigning for his participation in the 2018 ballot for the European elections.
Yeah, as an independent.
As an independent.
Yeah.
And he got something like 1.7%.
No. He was very close to actually succeed. It was 2.9 and he needed 3.
All right, okay, I
Yeah.
didn't recall the numbers. All right. So, afterwards, nobody actually cared about Simeon. We also had some other prominent figures like Peter Costa, was rather more seen as a good figure by the conservatives and the voters from the referendum. Or there was this party with Cătălin Ivan, if you recall, and Ioana Picoș that were with the pro-life movement. Not very, let's say, mainstream people in Romania, but those
In the relevant bubble.
Yeah, in the relevant bubbles, those nucleus of conservative movement had this idea, okay, let's try. Maybe not this time, but maybe next time. We don't know. Well, so the flu came in, and the flu actually turned upside down the axis of politics. And nobody would have thought that a catch-all conservative somehow party could come to Romanian politics out of nowhere during 2020, because the current PNL government thought that it had, at that time, all its leverage in power to control elections.
But fun fact, no.
No, because they absolutely ignored all the people that were upset
Over the handling of the pandemic.
exactly,
project. Yeah.
and they voted with whoever promised to kill all those idiosyncratic decisions that were taken by Lajos Orban's government.
Yes.
And our just burst out of nothing in
Yeah,
Romanian
and
politics.
that was the Alliance for the Unification of Romania. It still is today. Nowadays, the same person...
They were polling like 1-2%.
They were polling at
in the initial polls.
1-2%, but then again, someone helped them really well, and they eventually got 10% of the seats, 9% of the votes.
Exactly.
Mostly on this whole Wuhan flu thing is bogus, is nonsense. It's a threat to our liberty.
But mostly this was actually their whole political program. Like they didn't had a standard conservative agenda back then.
Not much.
Not much. There was some messaging with family, with God, because we have these religious issues, being forced to stay in our houses during Easter, having a policeman giving us light from the holy services during Easter services.
Yeah, the resurrection masses were cancelled during the 2020 Easter season. I was one of the less than 500 people nationally that attended them, me the atheist that is, because the government says I'm not permitted to, and therefore now I want them. If it's not permitted, now I want them.
At least we know how we can take Lucian to church.
I've been there twice, 1999 and 2020. So you can imagine, 1999 also during a state of emergency.
Yeah.
Now, anyway. A long ancient history. But the thing is that it worked. Screw the Pandemic Project was initially an ad hoc coalition, but a lot of it is still holding together. But after the end of the Pandemic Project, pieces of that coalition got splintered.
Now the whole link is because you had Terhes, Cristian Terhes, in the European Parliament that got voted.
Was on the same message.
Yeah, was on the same message, and he actually was voting in the European Parliament on the list of PSD from the Social Democrats, and afterwards he started siding with our here in Romania. Also, you had the so-called sovereignist, conservative, right-wing parties in Europe having similar messages in their respective countries.
A lot of them got on the side of anti-pandemic, although, two mentions here. One, Cristian Terhes at the time was able to coalesce them all At some point, he was the most popular MEP,
Exactly.
which is a fantastic performance for someone who was, technically speaking, independent at that point. And secondly, it all depended on who was in power. Like the far right in Sweden was in fact a little bit moderate on this one. Well, first of all, because Sweden didn't have a pandemic project the way it was in most of Europe. And in Slovenia, for instance, the far right was in power and enacting the pandemic project. So it actually benefited the left. The left was sounding like our in Slovenia. And they went even further. After winning the election, they forced the government to give back all of the money collected from the fines, thus plunging Slovenia into a recession, by the way. But doesn't matter. They were like, no, for the reason of justice, it matters. But primarily, the pandemic project benefited the right almost everywhere in Europe. And conventionally, the far right, because again, that becomes a problem because there isn't much far right in Europe, really.
And if we want to go back then, let's recall that 2020, Trump was still in power.
Yes.
And who was the first contester of Trump when coming to public health? Fauci.
Fauci, yeah.
Yeah. And everybody in Romania absolutely disliked that guy because the National Liberal Party was like, okay, what Tedros from the OMS and WHO, yeah, and Fauci to tell us, we're going to just copy-paste it.
Yeah, we're just going to do that because trust the experts, trust the scientists.
Trump is crazy. Trump wants to kill people. Trump wants to kill your grandma.
Yeah, let's listen to the professional bureaucrats, the experts, and whatnot.
So the whole rhetoric was back then, okay, wait, so maybe Trump isn't that mad. So everyone who tries to side with Trump in Romania, and it's against the whole baloney with the pandemic, should be voted. So based on this opportunistic frame, our got into the parliament. Well, after our got in, things started somehow synchronizing because our search for political partners in Europe, they starting having a pro-Trump agenda somehow.
Or at the very least, outlook.
Outlook, at least, yeah. And people starting thinking in the political framework that we have in the West. Progressives versus conservatives, and so on. But in that certain point of time, because of the whole problem with the pandemic, people who were against the pandemic and the whole issue with the project.
The political project,
yeah,
yes.
most of them were moderate. They went with our. But you still had that important faction that sided with Diana Șoșoacă, leader of the SOS party.
At the time, still in our.
At the time, still in our.
Kicked immediately after
Yeah,
the election.
but she founded SOS, like save.
I don't know what that stands for, but whatever.
Yeah. Anyway.
The plus size party.
Yeah, actually, the idea of SOS Romania, I think, is the idea.
And the reason I call it the plus size is not necessarily to insult the founder, but the logo is a plus. So it's quite literally a plus size party.
Actually, I think it's a cross, but
no, it's a plus. It's not a cross. It's a plus.
Okay, so
it fits into a
you
square.
had the more, let's say, extremist part of our voters going towards Diana Șoșoacă.
Yes.
Okay? You had Diana Șoșoacă advocating for importing Sputnik, the vaccine, for having closer ties with Russia, for not condemning Russia for the Soviet crimes because the USSR isn't the same thing with Russia and stuff like that. And actually, as the Russian propaganda was actually starting to build up in Romania, and I was one of the few public persons to say that, in 2022 we might have a breakout of the war in Ukraine because all those propaganda channels on YouTube, TikTok, if you know Russian, if you really know your Russian propaganda, you know when Russians do want to make a move. And all the signs showed towards a move in that direction.
Yes.
And I think all this rhetoric, like you cannot say that a person that goes on a frequent basis to the Russian embassy to the embassy of Venezuela, and other.
She went to Maduro's inauguration
yeah,
just a few weeks ago, yeah. But then again, this was 2021.
Yeah. And she started having this rhetoric, for example, regarding Moldova. That in Moldova, she stated, we have a lot of minorities like Transnistrians. Huh?
Что?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Excuse me? And okay, something is very fuzzy about it. And at that time, you started having two extremist forces from a leftist point of view in Romania. You had our on one side. You had Diana Șoșoacă on the other. The great issue with Șoșoacă, I think, is that she destroyed the whole idea of public protest in Romania because during the pandemic process, she started yelling like a crazy woman. And a lot of people that were against restrictions, against vaccine mandates, didn't want to go protest because of her.
Yeah, but eventually that still worked out
It still worked out, all right? But our, at that time, and Șoșoacă started separating even ideologically.
Yes.
So people starting asking questions. Are you for exiting the EU or not? Are you against NATO or not? And even through the first 2 years, our had some difficulties actually having a clear stance regarding foreign politics. Something happened in 2022-23. I think this is somehow bound to some changes in our financing and also consultancy, because out of nowhere, Simeon started talking with Bibi, with Netanyahu, started talking with Israel, central figures of the party like Sorin Lavrik that advocated for the memory of ex-political detainees, regardless of their political affiliation before the Second World War was cut down and he wasn't allowed anymore to speak in the Romanian parliament about them. Because even he got in a conflict with the representative of the Jewish minority in Romania. Also, Claudiu Târziu, he wasn't anymore, I think 2022 or 23, I can recall the year of the Congress. Our had a two-leader party scheme. We were actually two co-presidents. Now Simeon is the only president. So basically Claudiu Târziu was put in a more moral position, something like the doctrinary, the
president of the National Leadership Council or
something like that. All right, a very pretentious actually naming for that certain body, and our actually started building up somehow its own doctrine. I recall George Simeon's and ours leaflets from 2022. It was 2020. It was an absolute mockery because you had a lot of unconstitutional, impossible ideas that they went up with in the parliamentary elections, and I think that was a plus bonus why people didn't vote for them. Afterwards, in the current parliamentary elections that we had last year on the 1st of December, they also had some crazy ideas with houses at only 35 euros.
35,000.
35,000 euros, excuse me. That a lot of people didn't buy that shit, excuse me.
But some of them did.
Some of them did, yeah, all right. But a lot of people said, no, we are voting for somebody who's real patriotic and doesn't sell us dreams like that. And they would have voted for Șoșoacă, for SOS, or for the newly pot party. I can't. And that's just an inside joke.
The youth party that is the oldest in the party.
Yeah.
It's an average age.
So,
but whatever.
Actually, by promoting this kind of discourse, our and Șoșoaca's party accessing public funds, they started having political schools. They started having being more visible in the media. And I think the greatest political agent of Șoșoacă and of ours also were actually the liberal journalists that promoted our and SOS with every occasion. The extremist party supports the idea of traditional family.
Yeah,
Those extremists say that we shouldn't have gay marriage. Those extremists
without
are
realizing
against...
that those are in fact very, very popular
And
positions.
actually, yeah, because they were just in their ivory tower block there, they didn't think that, well, actually, most of Romania's population actually think that way. Okay, so actually mainstream media promoted
Very similar
SOS.
strategy to Donald Trump, who also benefited from billions and billions and billions of dollars of free advertising.
Thank you, CNN.
CNN, in particular CNN, but also MSLSD. Anyway, yeah, it was a very similar situation, although there are things that have happened in the meantime that accelerated the separation. Of course, the escalation by Russia in Ukraine.
Yeah, that was the first thing.
Separated things. The swift ending of the pandemic project
With the war.
soon after. I mean, legally it ended on March the 9th, I think, 2022. But de facto it ended in the same afternoon of February 25th, let's face it. So there was that. And until the meeting with Netanyahu or whatever, with Likud party more often, there was also an increased awareness of the fact that, look, you don't have to go full Shoshaka, but by the same token, the regime sucks. And the non-systemic left already has representation, USR. Why exactly shouldn't the non-systemic right have representation as well? And then eventually to replace the system, right? There is, all along, the idea is that the Social Democrats and the National Liberals be physically replaced by USR and our, which will happen whether you like it or not. It's going to happen anyway. The question is whether it will happen in 28 or 32. Really, that's the only debate at this point.
So our actually became, let's say,
a more bona fide conservative party, slowly. And there's still work to be done, of course, but slowly became that. And also it really helped. The emergence of SOS helped a lot because now you have a point of comparison. Right? During the pandemic project, even the two of us got lumped together with the crazies because, well, because it was only one certain type of representation. And we're like, look, we're not members of any political party. We'll never be. Maybe we're members of one political party, the party with a single member.
It was just crazy. You would like speak from, for example, I loved during the pandemic to speak from Ludwig von Mises's point of view or from Hayek, and everybody was like, you are with Shoshaka. No, just stay put. I'm talking from a straight libertarian point of view. No, then Shoshaka is libertarian. No, please.
That's not how this works. Yeah, so we got lumped into with the crazies, but by the same token, at least at Freedom Alternative, we took the position that, look, this is the political project called the Pandemic Project. We will work with the army that is possible rather than the army we would dream. And then, this coalition can go fuck itself immediately.
And actually,
after.
I recall the discussions in the first 2 years up until the war when our brother talked about joining the ID. The ID first?
Yeah, at first it was the idea of joining ID, yes. Identity and Democracy, the far-right group in the European Parliament until June 2024. Okay.
And afterwards, they just shifted because the whole issue with the war in Ukraine really separated things because people started asking questions, started taking sides. Everybody started having a stance. There was moderately like pro-Ukrainian, very far pro-Ukrainian, or mostly like not pro-Ukrainian, but indifferent towards Russia.
Pro-Russian is very small.
Yeah, but actually the pro-Russian segment is very small in Romania.
Yes, for obvious reasons. So that's when the shift happened ideologically towards ECR. And this year, well, actually last year in 2024, the shift happened institutionally as well. George Simeon now is one of the vice presidents of ECR. Whereas the ID group now, because that's what I was asking you during the break, and we checked. Now the ID group is actually split into two: the Patriots for Europe
A more, let's say, digital group.
Yeah, and then the sovereign nations of Europe, which is which is the psychiatric hospital, effectively, right?
Let's note that not even Shoshaka was admitted there.
Yeah, and Shoshaka was not even admitted at that psychiatric hospital. So that's how crazy this lady is, right? Although her colleague, the fellow MEP, Luis Lazarus, is actually a very weird guy, because I know him from during the conspiracy shows and his New Age shit. But when you listen to him during the agricultural subcommittee of the European Parliament, he's the sanest person in the room 100% of the time, which tells you just how crazy the rest of the MEPs are. Like if Luis Lazarus can be the voice of reason there. So that's why I'm saying that European politics, not just Romanian politics, European politics has become very weird, where sometimes you have to do these kinds of alliances of convenience, whether you like it or not. And this presents a problem for the people who root for polarization and who can't think in these terms of depending on the current political project.
For example, you have this MP from Cyprus. He's independent, and he's mostly left-wing.
Yeah, he's a leftist-ish, but not really. Sometimes.
But he's taking the sides of the part of sovereignists right now in the whole issue with the elections, and that's crazy for the left.
Yeah, because
politics in Europe isn't what.
It's a clown car.
Yeah, it's just.
It's not just Romania. I mean, Romania is now the central point in the European Union anyway. The central point of the clown show. But the clown show is taking place on a much wider cloud car, which is EU politics at this point.
And that car, just imagine a Volkswagen, that Beetle full of clowns. Okay?
Yeah, pretty much. And
that's the European Parliament right now.
And several clowns on top of it, just honking all together.
Yeah, no. The whole spectrum of European politics just land shifted last year, and I think anyone from outside the continent cannot understand it fully.
Yeah, which is precisely why we see, I'm sorry for my American friends, but they sometimes project the American context upon, not just upon Romania, but also upon the EU politics in general. And I'm like, guys, there's such thing as 7 or 8 or 9 parties in the parliament, and there really is significant differences between them, in a way that it's unimaginable for the American mind, accustomed with 2 parties for the last 150 years or so. Because now, prior to that, there were 3 actually in the US, but that's a separate story for another day. Yeah. And the differences can be pretty striking. Like you see a left-wing MEP siding with the sovereignists on some issues, or the other way around. Like, you know,
well, we had a conservative party in Serbia proposing a lesbian prime minister.
Not just proposing, but upholding it for several years. Anna Brnabic was prime minister until like 2 years ago, as part of a right-wing populist government. The same thing with Alternative für Deutschland. Their president is in a same-sex marriage with a Sri Lankan immigrant or something like that. These are the kinds of things that you wouldn't really imagine on the furthest far-right fringes of the GOP. People there are far more consistent. In Europe, not so much. In Europe, there's a lot of clown car. And quite frankly, I love it because it makes life much more fun. And also, I'm not a big fan of seriousness uber alles. Right? I don't think people should be that serious all the time. I'm actually so skeptical of people who are too serious.
Coming back to the war.
Yeah.
I think we should actually give credit to the mainstream media, because the mainstream media asked the questions that forced our leadership to clarify the party's position on Russia, on Ukraine. I know it did dissatisfied a lot of their voters with the issue on, tough. But on the other hand, right now, it's the second party in the Romanian parliament. The voters that didn't advocate for some sort of support for Ukraine, because our was somehow moderate on the issue, in the end, stating somehow, and just lately they stated that, I was actually one of the first persons to say that publicly, okay, we will support Ukraine, but we need something in exchange, all right? We should receive guarantees for our national minorities over there. We should receive something as other countries receive, as in stock, in national companies, anything. Right? It's just a bargain.
Yeah, welcome to diplomacy.
Welcome to diplomacy, because when Ciolacu went to Kiev, Zelensky was, okay, what do you want in exchange?
Yeah, didn't have a prepared answer for that.
Oh, we just want to help. Okay, and the people that were mad back then for Romania just sending some Kevlar helmets and vests that anyhow would eventually expire, because Kevlar expires in 5 years and starts decaying. Those people that just got mad on that issue, okay, they voted for SOS because Shoshoka parties was straightforward, pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian, and so on. And excuse me, SOS voters speaking English, but
Not that many of those.
not many of those, yeah, but still, it was forefrontally pro-Russian. Okay, you cannot say that you are pro-Romanian and you speak with the Russians, but still you somehow try to cover up all the things that they have done during the Second World War and during the communist period in Romania. Okay, there is absolutely no excuse for crime. It doesn't matter if it's done by Russians, by Germans, by Americans. Crime is still crime. All right. So, going back, most of this kind of voters, and we starting literally having a anti-Ukrainian, but not actually pro-Russian narrative,
Yeah.
but mostly a anti-Ukrainian narrative that was based actually on the misleading information and propaganda done by the left. Because the pandemic just ended so soon, people started asking questions. And also now Ukraine is the current thing. Okay, fuck Ukraine because you just lied us 2 years with the pandemic shit and we don't want to believe you at all.
Yeah, I oppose the current thing.
Okay? So people weren't
No,
pro-Russian.
I support the opposite of the current
thing, okay?
Yeah.
So people weren't against Ukraine actually or pro-Russia, they were against the current thing. It doesn't matter what the current thing is, okay? That was first thing first. Second, the Romanian government was very untransparently with all the decisions regarding Ukraine.
Yeah, it became a good.
I think the best example is the issue with the Bystroye canal. That's actually a canal in the Danube Delta that is used by both Romania and Ukraine for commercial purposes. And
The widening of it
by the Ukrainian authorities can have
ecological implications on the Danube Delta, which is in itself somewhat a natural museum, but not really complicated.
Yeah, and mostly administered by Romania.
Yeah.
And although Ciolacu and the PSD-led government had the information from the Ukrainian government regarding the whole operations over there, they didn't post the information or use it publicly. They just kept it in the drawers and use it at the right time
For political
political gain, trying somehow to get a card over our, because usually our and Simeon had the whole anti-Ukrainian rhetoric, and now Ciolacu tried to gain some points on the issue. It didn't manage because people... It didn't work, yeah. And the other thing was regarding the issue of funds, because the EU sent funds for the Ukrainian refugees, and nobody actually told us on live television that those funds come from the European Union. Everybody thought that the Romanian government is actually subsidizing
the money, yeah.
And here comes one of the issues that actually came into force in the current presidential campaign that we had in December, in November and December, that the Romanian government is somehow spending around I think it was 15 times more on a Ukrainian child than on a Romanian one.
Yeah,
Well,
the number is always
The
changing.
issue is false because the so-called allocation of public
Allotment.
allotment, subsidy, monthly allotment for a Romanian child is from the Romanian government, whilst the one for a Ukrainian refugee child is from the EU.
Yeah, and here the Social Democrats got their cake and ate it too, because when accused correctly, hey, what the fuck, they're like, but we were honest about it. And it's true, if you go on the Government General Secretary website and you read a PDF file that is like 150 pages, somewhere around page 74, there it is, openly transparent, not just that the EU is sending money, but also exactly how much and what items, and the information is public. It's just that it's not public in a propagandistic way or in a way that most of the public can digest, because just like in the US, it's true in Romania as well, who the hell reads policy papers of 150 pages or more? Well, I do, but I'm crazy.
Isn't it actually an example of bad communication? Because PSD, PNL...
No, it's bad faith. Straight up bad faith.
PSD and PNL, they actually controlled mainstream media through government funds.
During the pandemic project
And also afterwards.
Yes.
They could have used all those mainstream media outlets to actually...
broadcast government policy. Yeah.
They didn't.
They didn't. Yeah, it was intentional. That's why I'm saying it's bad faith. It's not a mistake.
Yeah. So, because all of these mistakes and although all the propaganda done by the left, now we are Ukraine, we shouldn't talk about the issue of Romanian nationality, Ukraine, Romanian language.
Yeah, we'll have time for that after the war.
The issue that Ukraine, up until this year, they had recognized two languages, both Romanian and Moldovan.
Which doesn't exist, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which has been an issue.
The issue was legitimate,
of course,
for the Romanian people. And having the left saying, no, shut the fuck up. Who says something like, we have Romanians in Bukovina or in southern Bessarabia and Bujak is a pro-Russian.
That's when they lost
kind
the
of
plot.
propaganda, and they lost a lot. Yeah, so, whoever at that time said something patriotic in favor of the Romanian people's interest got their votes.
Yeah, and
it's just simple.
The mainstream media slandered them with a pro-Russian label, but the electorate once again turned out smarter than that, and they're like, hold on a second, how is it pro-Russian to discuss Ukrainian policy that is, well, public information and has been that way for so long? And 5 minutes ago when Poroshenko was president, this was a legitimate issue, in fact, because there had been discussions about that in 2018, 2017. So that was
and the same issue with corruption in Ukraine. If somebody just whispered something about Hunter Biden, the laptop, the Biden's family affairs in Ukraine, or the issue that the current governing party in the Rada actually has a whole corruption scheme, no, that's pro-Russian propaganda.
How dare you mention that Sluha Narodno is also a grift? Well, of course it is, because it's modeled, because again, and this is the international context. In 2017, 2018, 2019, almost everyone in Southern Europe, Southwest and Southeast, and that includes Ukraine and Eastern Europe, had a USR moment. Because again, everyone is living in Eastern Europe, you just don't know it yet. Okay? Because I insist on that, and probably till the end of this decade, I'll continue to mention this in almost every video. You all live in Eastern Europe, you just don't know it yet. So the USR moment, which is to say quasi-leftish populism. It happened in Slovakia with the previous president, Zuzana Kaputova. It happened in Hungary with the previous attempt at overthrowing Orban. What was he saying? Markizai Péter. It failed, but it was the USR moment. It happened in Greece a little bit earlier than that. The coalition of the radical left, Syriza, which they ended up in government, and they were terrible. It happened in Ukraine with Sluha Narodnu and Zelensky. I mean, I can even quote myself here. Immediately after that election campaign, I was there. I was in Ukraine, and I made a video about the election campaign and about what a terrible mistake the Ukrainian people made by voting for Sluha Narodnu, which that video went out. I mean, people who are interested in policy looked at that video and they were like, well, probably the crazy man is correct. But then that video got forgotten and then got sent through the whole NAFO-TARD groups. And then they were like, oh my goodness, you're pro-Russian. And then, people familiar with this channel, they were like, and then the actual pro-Russians, they were like, no, actually, this guy is yours too, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really funny because the attempt at polarization failed miserably over the long run. Because ultimately, if you look at it by policy, and this is precisely why neither myself or you belong in a political party, because we keep on looking on the policy. And on policy issues, you can't really say that these things are pro-Russian, because they're really not. And the impact on that eventually spread out from Romania to all other parties. And now this term sovereignist has become a slur, but then some political parties all over Europe they're like, okay, we'll appropriate your slur. Fine, we are sovereignists. And therefore, now you have the Sovereign Nations of Europe group in the European Union.
And it's very funny because they didn't name themselves sovereignist. It's like naming
it's an exonym.
It's actually like naming the Eastern Romans Byzantine. It's exactly the same thing.
Yes.
Actually, the mainstream media coined the term sovereignist.
Yes.
And something like, okay, you want to uphold your own sovereignty? It's
sovereignty.
Is it something bad? Well, we should give up sovereignty towards the EU. I mean, like.
Thank you for saying that. Now,
okay. I know what I'm gonna vote. Okay. So, the equation is simple. Are you against mandates during the pandemic? Are you against the current thing? You are Putinist, and everyone in Romania was like, "Mătai Putin."
Yeah, your mother
is Putin. So whoever is actually coined by the mainstream media as being pro-Putin, okay, we're gonna vote for the pro-Putin guys.
Yeah, not because we're Putinists, but because screw you.
It's like turned upside down psychology.
Yeah, reverse psychology.
Psychology.
Yeah, and this is precisely what eventually happened, at least with some people who ended up voting for Călin Georgescu. They actually didn't vote for
the same thing.
Yeah, they didn't vote for Călin Georgescu, but they voted for the institution of the extremist candidate.
Yeah, and now let's bring you up to the presidential elections and the main subject. We had Șoșoacă that was actually banned from the presidential elections through a decision of the Constitutional Court, somehow implying that she is against constitutional values and
a very dubious decision in and of itself.
Because that created a very dangerous precedent because, I mean, maybe what we're saying here can be unconstitutional for the Constitutional Court. Okay, maybe we can't run for elections because we said something here that the judges over there don't like.
Or may not like it 5 years from now or
exactly.
10 years
from
now. All right.
And people starting asking questions. So the system doesn't want in the election a candidate that has that kind of public discourse. All right, you're going to find one. But the so-called sovereignist electorate was already fed up with George Simion because Georgia made some mistakes, had some issues, the promises with building houses with 45,000 euros and stuff like that. And mostly in our organizations at the local level, people didn't want to vote for him. So that's why actually he only got, I think, 17% of the whole ballot, whilst the party got 23?
No, he got 13 and the party got 18.
Yeah, something like that. Okay,
yeah, there was some difference. Yeah.
There was some difference. So
significant enough.
Yeah, it's still significant. I mean, technically, I think resignation would have been an option back then, because all of the party leaders done that, and he was in the largest margin from a political candidate to the actual
Polling of the
party. So people wanted a better option than Georgi Simeon. Besides, for example, I think it was a great stunt that the press conference with the foreign press, I think that was the best political stunt in the whole campaign. He really impressed a lot of people, but yeah, too less in the end. And
Too little.
too little. And apparently, somehow out of nowhere, this Călin Georgescu guy just popped up. No, he didn't pop up.
Yep.
Okay, this was just a bad excuse for the current regime to say something like, "Oh, we were catched unprepared. We were caught unprepared, just as in the winter time." When we weren't expecting the snow.
Yeah, pretty much. To be fair, and that's again another topic about another point of you're all living in Eastern Europe and you don't know it yet. This has been going on quite often more lately. I mean, it happened in 2014 when the Swedish authorities were caught unprepared and didn't expect that the snow will be big in Stockholm in December. So these things happen. Or like in California, they were surprised. Oh, we didn't know that we're going to have open fires that can burn everything up. Oh, it's not like they've been happening almost every year for the last 40 years or something, but whatever. Yeah, so everyone is living in Eastern Europe. You just don't know it yet. So yeah, the regime claimed that they were surprised. Of course, they weren't surprised because in fact the regime was funding Călin Georgescu. And they really tried. I mean,
since 91.
91. Well, probably since before that, but from 1991 I have
that was theatrical call.
But from 1991 I do have and presented incontrovertible evidence for sure. In any event, Georgescu aside, I loved it when the regime shills, as we say sometimes here, they detonated themselves, because they really, really tried to deny the National Liberals' involvement. And they denied it for almost a week until...
The Russians!
Yeah, until the amount of evidence became impossible to deny. So, you know, I'm very grateful to them, because even I have discovered a new National Liberal shield that I wasn't expecting. So, I mean, I really like it when they glow so much. So it was really funny to watch. But the thing is that eventually what that will end up meaning is eventually more people will find out, oh, okay, so that guy was the regime's guy all along. Okay, next extremist candidate. The institution of the extremist candidate will not die. That's the part that probably now terrifies...
Something like extremism will prevail.
Yeah, pretty much. So basically voting will continue until morale improves, and okay, that guy is terrible, fine. And the next terrible guy for you, right? Because it's now larger than the Vadim segment 25 years ago.
Way larger, but it's still... the thing that is very curious about Georgescu is that in all this sovereignist voter pool, he isn't seen as a, let's say, lesser evil. He's actually seen as a savior. And that's something very different. Because in respect to Vadim or even George, they didn't have this sort of, let's say, cult around them.
Yeah, the cult of personality was, to the extent that it exists or existed,
it was rather more internal.
More mellow, definitely. Călin Georgescu, because of his new age background and his impeccable, his team's impeccable editing skills, video editing skills, and his funders, the National Liberals, that is, money and gaming of the algorithm, he's managed to create a decently sized cult of personality.
But let's begin with the story. And I'm going to begin with the story since I actually know it. Because I first heard about Georgescu, I think it was 2007.
Some, yeah.
He's starting back then, entering through the back door of some.
City halls with the whole
No,
sustainable
no, 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 no.
development thing.
I didn't know about the subject. I'm with the city halls and the projects. I'm speaking just about the idea that he's somehow a NATO official,
The UN.
a UN, excuse me, a UN official that is repenting from his globalist experience, and he's coming back home to Romania to save our Orthodox and national pride, and tell us about what's actually happening at the UN. And
That was 18 years ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you had a lot of people advocating for his movement, România renaște, something like that. Romania is
Yeah, Renaissance.
the
of Romania.
renaissance of Romania. Back then, there were some books advocating for distributism, and the whole distributism movement at that time somehow tried to promote Georgescu. You had an association named after Ion Mihalache, who was the leader of the Romanian National Peasant Party in the interwar period, mostly left-wing actually.
And to this day, distributism in the West, you guys see it in the Catholic left.
Precisely so. They tried to penetrate some bubbles of people that could eventually, in the future, promote Georgescu. And he came in certain crisis moments as an alternative for the current government. Okay, he was not once proposed for prime minister.
2011, 2012, 2015. Actually, in 2015, he was proposed as the finance minister, but still.
But you know, the corrupt politicians, the Freemasonry, the occult conspired against him. That was actually the official
wasn't he
statements.
still active in the Freemasonry at the time?
Wait, in the nationalistic Orthodox bubbles, that was the discourse. Okay, this is our savior, and as a Christian, I cannot believe in another savior than Jesus Christ. Excuse me. Okay, so this kind of political talk, I think, doesn't suit up today, and I can understand the voters' need to have a embodiment of their respective wishes. All right, but wait a minute. All right, he has done something unprecedented and very well greeted by the Romanian people. He was, I think, the first politician since Vadim Tudor
Vadim, yeah.
that literally spoke honestly somehow about the Romanian people in the way to, let's say, reestablish a national pride.
Yeah, in an uplifting manner.
In an uplifting manner that was totally against with all the propaganda that the left just plunged all these years against the Romanian people.
Yes.
Okay? Everyone was fed up hearing that we are the most humiliated people among Europe, that we don't have history, that we only exist for 100 years. All that crappy bullshit, that Ștefan cel Mare wasn't so great, that we have a shitty history, that the English have a better history than ours, and stuff like that. Okay, we just were fed up with all these comparisons and shitty talk about our history and our identity and mostly our faith. And because the mainstream media was somehow actually endorsing any candidate but Georgescu, everyone amplified actually voting for him. All right, because people were like, oh, we'd rather have Ciolacu with all his corruption schemes than Georgescu. We had some jokes done like, hey Cholaku, don't be mad that was with the Nordis scheme. Well, he was somehow implicated in his party in a great
Real estate
real
grift.
estate grift, yeah. That the mainstream media tried somehow to get him down in the polls, but guess what? The conservative strata of the PSD who voted for Georgescu
Yeah.
because all that propaganda done against Ciolacu. So basically, everyone contributed to Georgescu's success.
Yes.
Yeah,
Whether
the
they
mainstream
intended
media,
to or
the
not,
left,
yeah.
the PNL, PSD, Georgi Simion for his mistakes, and also his team, because he has a very powerful team in his backing, and yeah, the issue with the funds, the issue with TikTok, the issue with having a campaign online. Excuse me, I do not recall in the 2014 election somebody say something about Klaus Johannes on Facebook. Oh, he manipulated somehow elections on Facebook.
Well, actually, yes, I should know because I was there. I was on that side. And what we did in 2014, because I'm not ashamed to it, because we beat the pro-China
But the
candidate.
regime was somehow against it.
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, we beat the pro-China candidate, so I'm still happy with my work 11 years ago. But at the time, all we did was replicate Obama's strategy from 2008, which is to tap into Facebook's API with friends of friends, and therefore get to approach online, yes, but get to approach individuals who rarely vote and get to radicalize those, so we get new voters in such a way that the opposition couldn't, because the opposition was still running a campaign as if this were 1992. That's basically what Georgescu's campaign did, exactly the same thing, but not on Facebook, but on TikTok, with a very similar algorithm. I mean, we're gonna still gonna pretend that TikTok's algorithm is really that different from Meta's threads. It's not really that difficult. They're all kind of the same. Very different, very small differences between them. But the thing is that the regime had to invent something to explain away Georgescu's rise in voting, in polling, without implicating themselves, which, let's face it, it was a difficult task. And it turns out an impossible task.
Well, and it isn't as if the Romanian legislation forbids exploiting algorithms on social media. So, well, the whole issue right now is that, let's say, the whole canyon between the different parts of the Romanian political spectrum regarding the voters, it's
chasm.
It's just enlarged. And I'm gonna give one clear talking point. It regards Moldova again, because mostly people from Moldova, Romanians from Moldova, are against Călin Georgescu. On one hand, because they are connected to the mainstream media that just demonized him of being pro-Russian, in essence. And I don't say that he's somehow maybe pro-Russian. I'm not clear what this guy wants right now, all right? On the other side, is very interesting to talk about. You have some supporters for Georgescu in Moldova coming from a rather more conservative part of the society that just don't want LGBTQ stuff.
Yeah.
And mostly I think we have to talk right now who helped Georgescu in the long run, not just the short one. And first thing first, we're going to start with USR, and especially with Elena Valerica Lasconi, being the runner-up
In the first round.
In the first round. Well, she had that public statement.
Yeah, she called us all fascists.
Yeah. So, not textually that way, like you're all fascists, but the idea of speaking just...
If you're opposed the parent one and parent two type of policy, that's fascist talk. That's a very honest translation of her public statement. But basically called 90% of Romanians fascists.
Okay.
Well, your mother is a fascist, so, you know, you need my vote so the crazy guy doesn't get president. Well, you just lost it. Goodbye.
That was the statement that actually just kicked up Blasconi with any chance of winning the elections.
Yeah, Georgescu
because
would have
she
won the
might
second.
had a chance of winning them.
A
all right?
distant one, but
a
yes.
distant one, yeah, okay, because there were a part of the electorate that voted initially for Georgescu, and afterwards, okay, we just voted for fun. We didn't know who we voted for. Okay, this guy is that crazy. Okay, we won't vote for him in the second round. Okay, we had that type of people. But also, you had voters from the other side, from other candidates, from other parties that said, okay, this guy isn't right now loved by the regime. We will vote against the current political system, so we will vote for Georgescu. That was the mindset of people in Romania at that time. And at the 8th of December, if anything wouldn't have been banned by the Constitutional Court, Georgescu would have been president right now.
Yeah, probably.
Probably.
Very likely.
Okay, so USR, the whole mainstream media, talking against conservatives in a period of, in a time frame, mostly at the, let's say, between 2015 and 2020, whatever was conservative was labeled as extremist. And actually, nobody had the possibility to build up a authentic conservative party in Romania that would have been a more, let's say, honest partner for the current parties. Okay, you ended up with our sauce and pot. And on the other side, you have PSD. That PSD, during Ponta and Dragnea afterwards, mocked the idea of nationalism. They tended to be some sort of patriotic, but people didn't bought that.
Yeah.
Okay?
It was also difficult to buy, especially because of, Ponta was the pro-China candidate, really. So, yeah, patriotism with ideograms, no thank you. And then Dragnea was just straight up clownish too often. And that, even our illiterate peasants are smarter than that. Same thing with the Westoid leftist Elena Lasconi, who at some point was wearing like 3 crosses and all of that. And I'm like, come on, everyone can see that that's fake. And of course, everyone did see that that was fake. And that's precisely probably why the elections got annulled, because no matter what you would try...
Accepting ecumenical intellectuals. Excuse me.
Yeah, no matter what you would try, you would still have gotten the madman president, which, again, I mean, we had the president who was a drunken sailor, literally. We had the president who is a wardrobe, the current one. We had the president who was expert in geology.
Right now, I have only sea shanties in my head. Thank you.
Right. We had the president who is an expert in geology, and we had an unironic commie. Ion Iliescu, that is.
Yeah.
So, why not have a president that is specialized in pedology, which was contrary to what some people may assume. Pedology has nothing to do with
pedos.
No, it doesn't has nothing to do with kid diddling. It's the science of the soil. So, why not have a grifter pedologist with expertise in UN grifting and globalism? So, what is that bad? Yes. Would that be the worst thing that could happen in history? No, not really. I mean, the country has seen more weirder politicians.
I almost forgot of pot. Now, we have this party coming absolutely mostly from nowhere, but the mainstream media, I know how just label it as being the party of Georgescu, and that label promoted...
That stuck, yeah.
Just stuck on them, and pot in Romania means I can.
Yeah.
And that's why we had the joke, eu nu pot, I cannot. And just talk with them, and that's how they actually got in their parliament.
Much to the happiness of the grifter-in-chief, their founder, who was actually kicked out of the alliance from the unification of Romanians on ethical grifting grounds, right? Yeah. So she founded her own thing with blackjack and hookers, sometimes literally. and the mainstream media carried her and her old friends into the parliament, basically because they're stupid. I mean, a lot of this sounds like a conspiracy.
Well, Ana Maria Gavrila was actually promoted a lot by G4 Media for being critic about George Simeon and our. So, who actually helped Pot get into the parliament? You know?
Once again, the people who claim to hate them the most, and I suspect that in the case of the Youth Party, because again, it's an acronym. POT means I can, but it's an acronym for the Youth People's Party. I think that in that case it was stupidity. They really didn't know what they were getting themselves into. I mean, the media, not the party itself. The party itself is very honest about it. If you read their official documents, they have gender quotas. It's quite literally a corporatist startup. Because the founder, Mrs. Gavrila, is a corporatist grifter. And of course, you would only create a corporatist startup type of organization because that's the best thing she knows how to do, right? And if to the extent that there was a strategy from her, it was in this direction. Let's exploit the corporatist idiots and let them promote us for free because they didn't have much.
Well, it worked.
Of course
now
it
what?
Well, now what? I'm very happy with the current situation because now the Alliance for the Unification of Romanians has two toilet places to flush after. So, if you don't like it here, here's one
You
psychiatric
can go
hospital.
to Sauce or Pot.
Yeah, there you go. You have two psychiatric facilities just for the crazies. USR should also be happy because they could send some of their crazies to pot as well. I mean, everyone should be happy with that. And the idea is, get PSD and PNL out of existence.
Well, the funny thing with Georgescu, and we shouldn't forget about it, is
Yeah,
that
he denied any connection with pot.
yeah, but also we cannot actually understand if it was something fake or not, but still, great idea. You had TikTok post with Georgescu and the Sense Party that is actually progressive and
Very
with
far
Nicu
left.
Ștefănuță.
Yeah, no, very
far left, and actually no older people that voted for Sense because it's just saw it on TikTok.
Yeah, there was an attempt, again intentional by the far left, to co-opt the populist wave in such a way that, okay, maybe we can get on fake grounds, but maybe we can get ourselves into the parliament. Unfortunately for them, all it did was create more votes to be redistributed to the Social Democrats and our. Really.
I was very grateful.
Yeah, the Alliance for the Unification of Romanians is very much happy for the left-wing votes being distributed to them. Because, and maybe this should also be explained, and the reason I insist on all of this, if you're still watching here, you do have a problem, but the reason I insist is because our American friends have only heard about these things either from Alex Jones or from left-wing podcasts, and both of them, I tried listening to some of them because some of the Alex Jones types even had Georgescu there talking. And it was all of it was like mistake after mistake after mistake. I'm like, that's false. That didn't happen. So I'm trying to correct as many records as possible. The first round took place on November the 24th. Then parliamentary elections on December the 1st. So you already knew about the Georgescu populist wave.
And also bad idea to put them on the National Day of Romania.
Yeah, very bad idea.
Very bad idea.
But it is what it is. To be fair, almost always they do take place around.
But at least you have 1-2 weeks somewhere.
No. It's if you look back, no, it's always December.
But not on the 1st of December. Still.
Yeah, well, it was a feature of the calendar because last time they were on December 5th, 2 times ago December 6th.
Now, I think Ciolacu ass was pretty itchy when he decided to move the date of the presidential elections, actually. Because if you recall,
it was supposed to take place in
September. Yeah, and they had the whole discussion, the coalition, if they would have taken place in September, Simeon, I think, maybe best case would have finished second or third. You didn't have the time to talk about Georgescu in September because he wasn't already prepared at that level that he was in December. And Lasconi,
probably
debatable.
We would have never heard about her.
Debatable.
She would have gotten her for
anyhow, Ciolacu, first place if everything were to happen in September.
I'm not that convinced because during summertime, the whole country usually goes on autopilot. in almost all of August. Let's face it. So the turnout at the polls would have been lower. And what happens when the turnout of the polls is lower? Only the radicals vote. The possibility of surprises is even higher than in December.
But still, I think the party states would have been better represented back then, for sure. Because Georgescu actually stole votes from
Stole, as a metaphor.
as a metaphor from all candidates. He was somehow a sort of a catch-all candidate. And now I really want to dive in its history because he didn't came out of nowhere, as I told you. You documented, well done. I think everybody in the so-called sovereignist part of our political spectrum, everyone needs to see your video on it, because there's this great issue, all right? This guy has been lying to us and the whole campaign. Also, all the Romanian politicians that do actually know him lied to us. Oh, we don't know him. He came from nowhere. Excuse me.
Well, is that you on the same list with him 18 years ago?
Is it you in the same picture with him? In the same political body? In the same ministry? Okay? At the same address? At the same event? At the same grift? Excuse me. So this guy actually started grifting since 91. He was in the Ministry of Environment. He was actually teaching Iohannis administration's tips back in the beginning
when he was mayor of Sibiu, so that's 22 years ago.
Something like that. So wait a minute. This guy isn't new to politics. All right? You have those questions that were also put down by the left. What was this guy doing in the UK in 86? When nobody would have the chance to actually get out of communist Romania.
Especially not go. I mean, you know, the official excuse is that, well, he was going to do extra specialization on pedology, which may or may not be true. But then again, getting a scholarship and going to study abroad in 86 was possible, even if you were not part of the regime. But it was incredibly difficult, and you still needed to know someone or to bribe someone to get the exit visa, right? Okay, how did you get the exit visa? Because it may still be the case that there's nothing nefarious there.
Some public explanations need to be done.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, now we have the third thing. When the press pops up mics in his face, he can't answer anymore. It is something, every speech is a prop. All right, it's on a prompter, it's read in front of a mirror, like in the movie with the King's Speech. I cannot understand how it's done.
There was someone, I think it was a leftist, I don't remember who said it, but it was such a good point. You know, the hologram president. You know, sometimes this guy is not a ghost, but more like a hologram, right? When the hologram is projected, he sounds great, or at least articulated, not necessarily great, because a lot of it is plagiarized, but that's okay. All politicians plagiarize speeches, by the way. So no, that would be.
Most funny was plagiarizing Ion Antonescu, former Romania World War leader speech. Yeah, I mean, that was
he plagiarized Democrat propaganda. He plagiarized the American films, a South Korean film at some point. His team is specialized in plagiarizing. But again, most politicians do that. It's not specific to Georgescu.
Yeah,
but the fact that he can't answer a question without a prompter, and whenever you sometimes have the occasion of meeting him in real life, that raises some questions. I mean, who manages this guy?
Well, right? At least try making a joke or something, or at least
or recite a talking point if you can't come up
anything.
with yes.
All right. Now we have the fourth thing. Just came up. You had great career. We saw your CV. Okay, parts of it, the resume, parts of it that aren't actually clear. But what did you actually done all these years for us, for your country, but you did for us.
Or for the movement you claim to represent, whatever.
Because I think it's totally unhealthy for a person every 3 or 4 years to restart another NGO, another initiative, another project, as if you don't have a sort of continuity in your actions. Okay, he had a lot of initiatives. I want to see something from start to end, from his hands.
I'm sorry, you're wrong. He does have a continuity in his actions. They all have one thing in common. They're all for grift purposes. There is a continuity. It's just not the continuity you would like to see. But that's a separate story. But there is some continuity. I mean, they're all globalists. They're all a bunch of grifts. And then somewhere around 2019, 2020, he or the people managing him correctly noticed that, look, this whole green grift, sustainable development crap is coming to an end. And, good props to either himself or the people who manage him for figuring that out in 2020, when it was hard to figure it out. I'm starting to think that some of his members watch my channel, because because it's very rare. I mean, my channel is one of the 3 or 4 in total on YouTube who figured it out in 2020. In 2020, we did a video 5 hours long on this channel in English saying, look, this thing is over. Why? Because this is too much, and the bubble will pop, and it did. And again, he figured it out, or his people. And that's when he switched to sovereignist stories in 2020, 2021, right? Until then, it was all sustainable development, UN, Uberales, WEF kind of crap, essentially. And the only continuity is in grift and personal enrichment, which, again, fine, but then don't come up as a savior. I mean, I get it. You want to grift the UN, fine. I mean, that's a... at some point, I would rather him grifting the UN, because I know he doesn't believe one iota of what he says. So, lost money is still better than being spent by people who hate me.
People actually were lied to by him.
Oh, yeah,
okay? Because I can feel the whole excitement, okay, with his result in the first round of the elections. I can feel the enthusiasm that Romanians, have, now is the time for what?
For what?
Wait a minute. He came from the depths of the UN to save us from his ex-colleagues. Well, he was put down by the corrupt politicians that allotted him gifts.
And worked with and for him.
But no, he just stood up by himself. No. Wait. All right, okay. And when you start putting up questions, people are like, oh, no, you are paid by Soros. You are with Soros. Silvian is a Sorosist.
Yeah,
no.
To be fair, that segment is actually a lot smaller than it seems. It's very noisy.
Yeah, but still, they do have power right now in social media, in Christian conservative, let's say, bubbles that shouldn't be ignored. And there are a lot of people that say, okay, we're going with Georgescu. And I'm like, okay, go with Georgescu, but ask him the questions. Okay, he told us.
Know your product.
We're told that he speaks 7 foreign languages. Well, I'm not sure he can actually speak proper English. Okay, excuse me for not speaking English for, I think, 1 month almost.
I've heard him speaking English. He's not that bad.
Not that bad,
but it does
still.
sound Ziliestian, to put it this way. That is to say, he speaks English in Russian.
But what are the other 6 languages that people talked about? Okay,
I mean, there are more videos with me speaking in several languages than with Georgescu, and I'm a nobody. You know, for the allegedly most popular politician in this country, I'd like to see some videos, sorry.
But one thing, he isn't self-made. He isn't like an entrepreneur or an intellectual that based his whole fortune and
On selling his
stability,
expertise or
on selling
whatever.
his expertise and so on. All right? He just had some UN gibberish talk about the idea, and he even these days had this crazy ideas of there aren't that many cows in the whole world because
Yeah, I'm not gonna get into those
no,
specifics.
please, I mean,
because that's
those
straight up
so
crazy.
specific. He talked about monoatomic gold. Okay, gold is is a topic because you only have one isotope of gold.
Isotope, yeah.
But I actually Googled for monoatomic gold. What is this? I really do know some chemistry, and I was like, what? And I found some solution that you can take in, like to clear your mouth, something like colloidal silver, stuff like that. Excuse me. And he spoke about the rare elements in the periodic attention. He didn't said
Periodic table.
periodic table. He said tableau, like a tableau.
No, I mean he's correct.
It's like picture actually in Romania.
Yes, but also in Romanian, the periodics table can actually be called tableau lui
But still,
Mendeleev.
yes,
So
but still,
it's not wrong.
those rare elements don't exist in Romania because most of them don't exist in natural form.
Yeah, they don't exist at all in the natural form. Yeah,
So,
for sure.
he had a lot of this kind of stupid points as Gaza. The name Gaza
Comes
is from
from gas.
gas.
Yeah.
So I asked for just the Romanian audience, what is Slobozia coming from? Okay, pun in comments. So, wait a minute. I mean,
And what does Sculeni come from?
yeah, I didn't thought of that.
Didn't think. So yeah, what does Sculeni?
Lungeș Mângiuca?
Lungeș Mângiuca, Spermezeu.
Okay, puns in comments.
Is Vovul Pizda Babei, which is a real place, by the way. Anyway.
Așa. So, he had all these funny moments when his supporters didn't say something like, oh, he's wrong. Look at the other candidates. They have also their moments. No, they just defended him. Wait, when he told us that water is information, well, okay, water can store information from molecules and stuff like that, but let's not over-exaggerate it. The left also over-exaggerated some of the stuff Georgescu told us in some podcasts and on television, and that also gave him a boost.
Yes, because for instance, at some point he was talking about the Middle Corridor, which is a very real geopolitical project that is built basically to go around Russia with the expectation that Russia will be out of the global commerce for many years to come. And because he was a little bit sloppy with phrasing it, but it was very clear what he was talking about because he mentioned, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and all of that.
He mentioned a canal between the Black Sea and the Caspic Sea.
Yeah. He said canal rather than corridor, but it was very clear what he was talking about. Come on. And then, the exact same newspaper that had praised the Middle Corridor a few days prior, they're like, look at this crazy guy talking about a corridor from here all the way to Central Asia. I'm like, guys, are you crazy? I mean, you broke the news on it several days prior. So it's a conjuration or confluation of stupidity, not just from him.
So my
and his
prophecy,
people.
let's say it like this. If he will become president, I am not that confident that things will work the way that sovereignists want.
Come on, that's the easiest prophecy.
I know, but I'm saying it, let's say, in a soft manner for sovereignists, all right? Because they do not understand that you cannot rule properly without having the proper policy.
And without having a parliament to back it up.
I just want to hear examples of policy, of concrete policy, okay, coming out from Georgescu's mouthful.
Yeah, come on, that won't happen. But again, you're playing the easy mode. I mean,
Okay,
that,
because I wanted to play
yeah,
that
that's the
easily.
easiest
Okay.
prediction to make. I'll make a slightly more difficult prediction, which is we're gonna have
Thank you for being the bad cop.
yeah, we're gonna have a grifter president who will probably try to get as many EU grifts as possible for himself personally, and then finally the whole talking point about all
Something like Vucic?
yeah, something like Vucic, yes. And eventually, we're gonna have the first president that is truly a thief. I mean, he'll basically teach all of the ex-presidents and all of the other politicians. Look, guys, let me show you how it's done on the proper
Because
level.
speaking in a uplifting way about your country and people doesn't solve problems.
I mean,
Right?
it feels good,
It
but
feels good. I know the president should be a moral person. You have to know his moral compass to have a prediction on his moves. All right. In Romania, for example, the president actually can send back a law into parliament. All right. But the second time,
yeah,
he's
can't veto it,
can
but can
veto it.
delay it and can propose modification amendments to it.
Well, a president can come up national television and bring a problem in face of everybody. Okay, Băsescu done that several times. Iohannis didn't. Right? People want, let's say, more vocal president. Would Georgescu do that? And right now, in the let's say hardcore sovereignist bubble, people start contesting Georgescu, saying that Georgescu wants to be a friend of Israel, and the hardcore sovereignist bubble is actually pro-Palestine. Okay, they say that Georgescu doesn't want us to be the slaves of the EU, but wants to transform Romania into a slave of the United States under Trump. So he's contested right now, and nobody knows what can actually happen up until spring, because even though the Venice Commission issued that report that actually sends the Constitutional Court to the dumpster of history,
Yeah, pretty much.
maybe the Constitutional Court could issue another surprise and just block Georgescu. And what then?
I don't think that would be a surprise. I think that's the most expected
Yes, if-
outcome from pretty much everyone.
Let's say the polymarket shares just changing after after the podcast.
I mean, let's face it, but there isn't anyone in politics right now, observer or participant, who doesn't expect he'll be blocked. Heck, even the people who publicly support him now, they're actually banking on him being not permitted to run, because why not? I mean, you would do the same if you were in their position. That's one aspect. Second aspect, it wouldn't be such a huge tragedy if that happens. And third, if I were the Constitutional Court, I would actually let him run, because I don't think by May things will be the same as in December. Because a lot of things change in 6 months. Again, from this December 8th to May the 4th, that's 6 months.
And
6 months is an eternity at the speed of politics today.
And he was heavily delegitimized by moves like, oh, JFK Jr. is coming to Romania to endorse RFK, excuse me, Jr. is coming to endorse Georgescu. Not.
Yeah, it was based on a kernel of truth. That is to say, RFK's book, the translation in Romanian, had the preface written by Georgescu. That's true. And that's probably also the only piece of evidence that you can find
That the two are linked somehow.
yeah, not just the two are links somehow, but it's also the only piece of evidence that of Georgescu actually going slightly against his former globalist colleagues. Really, I mean, he claims that he broke it off with the globalists like 17 years ago. Okay, here's in 17 years, you had enough time. What's your body of work that shows that you really changed? And that's probably the only thing. He brought RFK's book. I mean, okay, fine, but
let's say as principle, for example, I oppose the idea of Georgescu.
yes,
Like
that is
making total abstraction of his person, all right, and his doings or undoings. But the idea that we, the Romanian people that want to live in freedom, we shouldn't just wait for a messianic figure to just pop up from a hat, like, all right, and say that I'm here to save you from progressivism, all right? That's not the case. If the Romanian people really want something that is really working for their future, they should start right now building up conservative NGOs, start having a solid conservative civil society that doesn't side in any way with the regime, with the secret services, with the current political parties, and that is only for principles and policy and not for endorsing my nephew, my father-in-law, or any that type of personal family.
There's one thing I need to add, and that's focused on raising your own elite, right? And this piece of advice doesn't work just with Romania. It's true in Hungary, it's true in Poland, it's true
Everywhere
in Germany,
in Europe,
it's true everywhere in Europe, especially these multi-party democracies, where it's quasi-easy to create your own new party, especially at the speed of politics these days. So, creating your new party comes at the end of the process, not at first. A lot of conservatives all over Europe, not just also in Central Asia, really recently, they make the same mistake. They start with the institution of the political party. No. That comes at the end. Where is your first 1,000 ideologues that know how to create policy and they're already prepared to be in power today? You at least have 1,000 of those really smart people, in addition to 100,000 NPCs.
Well, Trump's first days in cabinet were actually unrelented because he just
now,
had.
But if you compare
Now,
it with in 2017,
now,
he
I know
made the same
now
mistake.
because right now he's backed up. But who wrote all those executive orders? That's a question. Do we have right now in Romania a conservative think tank that can properly write executive orders and laws, and in the eventual case that a conservative party gets into power, can just put up those drafts into power? We don't have that. Okay? And
this is true all over Europe. I mean, how many conservative think tanks really exist in Europe? I mean, there is the school, I forget the name of it, in France, that created Mr. Bardella. Really, he's the first product of that. Okay, good stuff, but that one is only for French politics. Collegium Intermarium is only 6 years old. It hasn't produced anything yet, but to be fair, there's still plenty of time for them. Then there's the Bioethics Institute in Brussels, which is focused almost exclusively on pro-life policy, but at least they do a great job on that. Then there's the Center for Judicial Resources, which is mostly focused on the European Court of Human Rights, also in Brussels. And I ran out of... That's it. These are the only bona fide right-wing think tanks all over Europe. There's one in Eastern Europe, in Warsaw, 2 in Brussels, 1 in France, period. None in Italy, none in Spain, none outside of Poland, everywhere in Eastern Europe, none in Germany. Okay, fine, in Germany it would be illegal. Okay, I get it. But still, I'm serious, right? We don't have policy wonks that many. And you have to go really small, like, quite honestly, groups like us, who still do some of these things.
Yeah, but still, we do need a institutional form to do all this stuff, because just as a group, an informal group, okay, you can influence to a certain extent legislation, MPs, and so on. But still, you need to have strong organizations, institutions, private founded institutions that can create the future elite. Not only the political elite, but mostly the academic one, because the left actually strolled throughout European universities in the brinks of the 68 Cultural Revolution. All right?
The 68 won.
We don't have a counter for it. All right? And that was actually my precise aim when I founded Liga Studenților back 12 years ago. We need to counter the 68ers.
Yes.
Now, that's the main objective. We need a long march through the institutions, just as the left has already done right now. Today, most of the institutions are controlled by left-wing agents or people that were just brainwashed by the left. Okay, in the left narrative.
Functionally leftist.
So,
This way, yeah.
I think right now the main objective for conservatives in Europe should be sticking towards the Trump administration, but in a way to try to
Learn how to regime.
learn how to govern.
How to regime. I'm serious because a lot of right wingers don't know how to regime. Like I was looking at with the situation in Britain, and I'm like, the Conservatives were in power for 14 years, and you couldn't get one thing because they only had to get immigration right, and they would have been in power until 2040.
I don't know about Margaret Thatcher.
No, I mean today, right?
Okay.
So no, they lost to the worst incarnation of labor.
yeah.
I mean, Keir Stalin, seriously. Sorry, Starmer. I mean, seriously. And the only reason they lost is because they got immigration wrong. They only had to get one thing right.
Right.
And it's true with most right-wing parties all over Europe. That includes the Tories in Britain. Right-wingers today don't know how to regime. Sweden is an exception, but we both know why is an exception. And I suppose the Progress Party in Norway as well. But
Maybe Italy.
Norway is a small part. Yes, but even in Italy, it's only Fratelli d'Italia that knows how to regime. Lega doesn't. PDL doesn't. Since the death of Berlusconi, they're all running out like headless chicken, right? And Fratelli d'Italia does know, but Giorgia Meloni started politics in 1997 with the Students' League, right? And she's been through every single rung of politics. She didn't become prime minister overnight. No, she worked for 27 years to get to the level.
Yeah, because the whole issue of the right-wing parties in Europe is that they
lack patience.
They just go out to the elections. They vote for us because we, promise you something. They get into power, and now what? They don't have a clear vision or the empirical experience or the, let's say, doctrine that they're philosophy of governance, all right?
Right.
And they also do tend to be conservative, but in the bad way. They keep the policies of previous governments that, let's say, they think that, okay, we shouldn't change that because we might scare off our own electorate, okay, and that's bad. Look at Trump. Trump just burst in with courageous ideas, and he just kept up with them. And that's why I think he's going to have a good approval rate.
Yeah. He's also helped, at least in the US, it's also the problem for the Democrats that they're at their worst for decades. Yeah. It's not that people love Republicans that much. The approval rate for the Republican Party went up from 42% to 43%, so negligible. But the disapproval rate for the Democrats went up from 43% to 67%. Like everyone hates the Democrats, including some members of the Democratic Party.
Yes.
So, so it's a very favorable context. But in Europe...
Good job, Joe.
Yeah. To be fair, it's not Joe's fault. It really isn't. You can only blame someone when they have mens rea, which is not the case. I'm just saying. I'm not saying he's senile. Actually, I'm saying he's senile. Anyway, back to Europe. Too many of our right-wing friends all over Europe, they haven't even asked themselves, okay, how do I regime? Like a lot of them end up in the right-wing administrations, because I know some of these people personally, and I know they're watching this. And they're like, oh my goodness, but I didn't know that a certain order can be challenged in administrative court. And I'm like,
Oh,
good morning.
seriously?
Good morning.
That's like second year in law school.
I would say second grade in learning political literacy.
Voila.
Some of these things need to be learned, and there is no fast way of doing it. I mean, Giorgia Meloni did them the old-fashioned way and the hard way, which is you go and get your asses kicked in the court, first time, second time, then you figure out how the law works, and these kinds of things cannot be skipped. They're
But
not.
in order to achieve more in politics, I think we really need to keep our profoundness when speaking about spiritual matters here in the eastern part of Europe. But in technical issues, you are completely superficial. That's the whole problem. It's like, oh, it's gonna work somehow. We're gonna figure it out. No.
No, that's not how this works.
Politics, it's almost math. And in math, there's no room for error. Right? So, starting, you should get grassroots level, start challenging your local authorities, start afterwards challenging your, I don't know, the broader local level, even it's, I know, Krais, Județ, Voivodat, region, canton, or whatever you have back home. You should challenge your national authorities afterwards, right? By all means, try getting into practice. Try, I don't know, getting into trouble by challenging local politicians, getting your name displayed up in the local or national press, stuff like that. If you aren't able to do these basic things, you shouldn't be into politics. Period.
And definitely not shouldn't be that much into, okay, let's fix Europe. Okay, does your county know about you? Right? Because, this is another thing. The good people, the progressives in the European Parliament and whatnot, they are all now forced to admit, they're like, oh my goodness, Giorgia Meloni turns out to be a remarkably skilled politician. And I'm like, good morning. I told you this would be the case 5 years ago. And they're like, well, how did you know?
Surprise.
And I'm like, well, Giorgia Meloni didn't come to try to do geopolitics as a national leader until she learned how to beat the mafia at the county level in Italy. And do you have any idea how difficult that is?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Learning from local politics from bottom up actually works, even if you're approaching what you would imagine as small issues. Right? It's not the issue necessarily. It's learning the process, learning how authority functions, how to regime effectively, how to regime.
And having the whole exercise of fighting the government and
Creates
standing up
experience, yeah.
for values, standing up for the people. I must add one thing regarding the sovereignist, because it's somehow part of my fight. And a lot of sovereignists asked me in this autumn and even up to late December, oh, why aren't you supporting Georgescu or one of the three sovereignist parties in the Romanian parliament? I was like, okay, wait a minute. When I had problems with the secret services, with the police, for being independent and stating out some issues, did you somehow supported me? Where were you when we had problems with the PNL and when we were ransacked by political parties as an independent NGO for striking their decisions down in court? Okay? Did you supported us? Where were you when I was literally beaten up 3 times because I don't want to align with the regime or some pro-Russian, let's say, initiatives? You weren't here for me. So why should I be there for you? Because
What's in it for me?
What's in it for me? I mean, wait a minute. You just want the glory and to be supported, but you just want it for yourself, like sovereignist, but for myself, not for the cause of sovereignism, let's say in
Whatever
general,
that is.
whatever that is. Yeah? Like Christian, but not for Christianity, but Christian just for political image, okay? Patriotic, but not for the sake of our people, just for likes on Facebook. And I cannot endorse that. I'm sorry. Because anytime I went out in a fight, I went for the idea, not for the gains. Okay? I literally almost broke my neck because of it. I don't regret it, but I despise people that only do it for their own benefit. Okay? If you want to embody an idea, you have to embody it fully. And I think that's actually the thing we need in politics right now. Because we don't have sincere politics, and that's why we have only grifters and Sunday politicians that show up in parliament, all right, that don't do things properly, and we're starting merging up in circles like things didn't sort out these elections, let's see over 4 or even after 5 years what things can be sorted out. It wasn't the time for that. God only helped us with this little and so on. No, we can do more.
Yeah, and
But
the thing
we
is,
need to actually prove that we want more.
yeah, and whenever I make such a point, I'm usually countered with, "Oh, but are the leftists sincere?" And the problem is that the answer is yes,
Yes,
they are.
yes.
We can point to their hypocrisy, sure. Almost all politicians are hypocritical. We can point to their inadequacy, sure. We can point to their corruption. Again, most politicians are corrupt.
100%.
Yeah, but we cannot say that they're insincere. I mean, Merkel, I mean, even now when it is very much a disadvantage for her to say it, but she said it. I mean, she came up with her book and said, "No, I sincerely believed what Putin told me, and now I agree with everyone that I was a fool, but I honestly believed it. I honestly believe that."
KGB spy.
Yeah, I honestly believed it, that we can integrate 1.5 million Middle Eastern just how we integrated 2 million Turks 50 years prior. You can't accuse them of lack of sincerity. They honestly believed it. It was stupid and is stupid, but stupid and sincerity are not mutually exclusive. You can be sincerely stupid, right? So a lot of left-wingers in Europe are very sincere in their beliefs, or at least in some of their beliefs. Sure, do they get Chinese funding to be very green in public? Yes, they do. But they were already green before that.
Some can be naive in regard to their, let's say, scopes regarding
or the
policy.
effects of their policy, yes.
Yeah,
but that doesn't make
still,
any sincere.
On the practical scale, they really do know what they're actually doing. All right? So that's the difference. They work very professional, whilst people on the right side of the political spectrum,
very few of them, with very few exceptions. Right, one more thing. There's going to be snap elections in Germany this month, because it's really February. Who's winning?
Well, very interesting that the Christian Democratic Union,
which is
somehow
neither Christian nor democratic, nor
somehow,
a union lately.
yeah, and I think the current leadership of the CDU actually makes Konrad Adenauer just shift in his grave right now.
You don't like Merz? Why? I mean, he's definitely an improval over Mutti Merkel.
But not in the classic democratic way of saying the CDU. Well, at last, siding with the extremists in the Bundestag, I think it was a great idea for the CDU.
Of course it was.
Because backing on the immigration policy in Germany could actually make the CDU win the elections. This is a possibility.
You're doing what the people want, and that may win you elections. What a novel concept.
Yeah.
I loved it that after the Bundestag vote, where CDU sided with AfD on this, the first reaction was from Orban Viktor. The official statement from the Hungarian government was like, "Welcome to the club, guys." And yeah, sure, this looks terrible in the German press, but friendly reminder, 60% of the German journalists vote for Die Grüne, while only 4% of the German public overall votes for Die Grüne. I mean, the journalists are illegitimate and not representative of the population they report on. And so many of our friends on the right in Europe, they don't seem to wrap their head around this. They instinctively feel that the media is illegitimate, but they don't know why and how. Again, very approximate on the concrete things. And if we could only get more right-wingers
Yeah.
to be more precise
So
in
we
things.
might have a comeback of the CDU.
Yeah, so you're saying that CDU would...
Yeah, I'm thinking about it, and also maybe AfD would have a slight increase because through this vote, they were somehow legitimized by the CDU
Of course.
as a
It's clear that-
viable political partner.
Definitely the cordon sanitaire talk is over.
You had the elections in Thuringia where the people spoke about it. So
Yeah,
in the voting,
And to be fair, if I had been in Thuringen, I would have voted for Satan if he was on AfD's list, for one
God.
simple reason. Merkel tried to cancel the election last time around there and prevented AfD from getting into power, even though they were deserving. Now they should have run for re-election, quite frankly. So, if I had been a German in Thuringen, I would have voted for AfD. It doesn't matter who was on that list, just to spite the CDU former leadership. So that's why this time around nobody argued about it, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, if they won the election in one Bundesland, yes, but they deserved it, and we all know it, right?" But yeah, the cordon sanitaire strategy is over. Zemlya i betonom, maybe I should say, because it's a terrible way of doing politics. At some point, it had to die. It was tried in Romania as well, right? You see, once again, how special Romania is. It was tried, and it lasted for 5 seconds.
something like that. Yeah.
Politically speaking, that's dead. Again, now you're all living in Eastern Europe. You just don't know it yet. Next, it will be France. We're going to have snap elections in France in July, of course. And maybe Prime Minister Le Pen or Prime Minister Bardella. I mean, imagine that, having Emmanuel Macron having to appoint Bardella as Prime Minister. Wouldn't that be
Shit
awesome?
show. Yeah, awesome.
Wouldn't that be awesome? Overall, I mean,
The extremists are coming to power in Europe. Bardella will support Putin. Well, wait.
Actually,
Macron supported Putin with weapons up until, I think, April of
2022?
Yeah.
So 3 months after the war started, France was still selling weapons to Russia. So there's that. Meanwhile, Bardella was actually still too young to be in politics when the accusation of pro-Russia was still somewhat true with Rassemblement National. Nowadays, it's just not true at all. So yeah, this is going to be fun, because now you have... Basically, the idea is to eventually force the left to remain behind the times. Make them be the reactionaries and the weirdos.
Well, speaking of sovereignist, dear leftist, you didn't wanted classical conservatives. Now wash your heads off with sovereignists.
Yeah, pretty much. And on that happy note, thank you for the great effort, because I know how much of a great effort you made to be able to be in these videos, and especially shoot in English.
It's all right. Accepting my flu and my health issues is all right.
Yeah, that's what I was aiming at, but I didn't want to bring them necessarily up. Where can people follow your work? You promised that you're going to have a channel in English.
Yeah, I've thought about it actually, because I think speaking only in Romania isn't enough. You can follow me on Facebook, and you have those translation apps and stuff like that. Mostly I write on Facebook. I restructured my YouTube channel, but I didn't actually structure it up properly, but mostly on Facebook. And also for organization, it's ligastudenților.net, as in Students League. Also, you can follow up on Facebook. Right now, we're actually working since the pandemic. We do have a international relations department, because we got in contact with anti-COVID mandates students around Europe, but they were only focused on the mandates. We're really keen on founding a conservative student movement in Europe. We're keen on also having partners in the US. So if you're interested in having this kind of partnership, and also if you want to support us, and if you want to maybe put up the basis of a conservative student movement in Europe, now it's the time. Because if we don't do that now, I think 2028 2032 and so on will still gonna be conservative shit shows with no real representation or a real think tank.
Yep, and the best moment to start a conservative NGO is today. The next best moment is tomorrow, and so on, because it's a seed in the future, effectively, right? I was going to make a joke, but maybe no. It's better to end in a happier manner. So yeah, I was basically going to say, the transnational anti-globalist movement. Like why? Because for about 2.5 seconds in political time, the left did try to mock some of us, because they're like, oh, but you're a nationalist and an anti-globalist, but you have friends in 25 countries. And I'm like, yes, and they're like, oh, but it's transnational anti-globalism. I'm like, I like that. I'm gonna nationalize it.
Yeah.
That got nationalized. So right. Thank you for coming. Thank you all for having the patience to watch. To give you an idea, it's almost midnight here. See you around. Cheers.
Remember, the future belongs to patriots.